Evening Cherries fans, and welcome to this latest special show here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Before I welcome on my very special guest tonight, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out what they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Now, our special guest tonight is a goalkeeper. He started his career in 1986 with Wolverhampton Wanderers. He then had loan spells at Blackpool, Cheltenham and West Bromwich Albion before joining the club. He then played at Arsenal before playing for Huddersfield and Gillingham, where he actually won the playoff final. It is a pleasure to welcome onto the show Vince Bartram. Evening, Vince. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good to have you on the show, and thank you so much for joining me and Matt on this special show tonight. So let's start off where it all began. So you was born in Birmingham. You attended Hagley RC High School. Was it during your school days that you started playing football?
Yeah, I mean, we moved around a bit. You say I attended Hagley. I ended up there at 12. Before then, I sort of had 4 or 5 different schools. We moved about sort of the West Midlands, sort of Quinton, Halsowen, sort of even into sort of Edgbaston, and then moved out to a place called Cannock near Wolverhampton for 2 or 3 years. And I joined a club there as what we call under nines now. In those days, I wanted to be a centre forward, but I wasn't good enough. And I stopped playing for a couple of years. Just played school football, and then, like I say, I moved to Hagley. And got in with a group of lads. It was a nice school. Got in with a good group of mates. And at 13, messing around on the field one day, and one of the lads said, "Oh, you're good in goal. You should play in goal." And I was like, "Well, Nick's the goalkeeper. I don't want to sort of take his." But Nick was like, "Well, I don't want to play in goal. You can play in goal." So that was it. And just for a couple of years, sort of played for the school. And then I was 14 and got a phone call from a club called Old Swinford. Sort of my 2 boys are just sort of playing grassroots football. Sort of, my eldest is at Christchurch, and Old Swinford was similar to sort of a Christchurch Wessex League, Dorset Premier League sort of team. They were in the West Midlands. And this guy was setting up an under-15s team for them. So I joined. Played under 15s, but also they had an under 18s team that sort of played and had in the league and played in the Youth Cup, and they had a 3rd team that played in what was basically a pub league around Dudley in the Black Country, and then the reserves played in the West Midlands Division 2, and the first team played in the West Midlands Premier League. And after 2 years there, I was 16. At the end of the season, sort of just about to go into 17, I'd stayed on at school for 1 year, and I managed to get into their first team, played 4 games for their first team, and Wolves were looking at a centre forward at Old Swinford at the same time, and ended up taking the 2 of us at the end of the season, a lad called Neil Edwards and myself. That's basically how I ended up being a professional goalkeeper.
Yeah, Vince, when did you decide that goalkeeping was for you then?
Well, I'd say around sort of 12, 13, I played a couple of games. I'd come on and I remember, probably scoring one goal in my whole life as a centre forward. And like I say, it's something I always enjoyed. So, we used to play Wembley and headers and volleys, and I'd go in goal and, you'd make a few saves and yeah. And then when people around you start going, it's the peer thing, isn't it? When your mates are telling you, oh, you're good, do this, do that. And as soon as I bought my first pair of gloves, literally, that day that the lad said, or Nick said to me, I don't want to play in goal. I think the next day, went into Birmingham with my mum and dad, bought a goalkeeper shirt, bought my first pair of proper goalkeeping gloves, and that was it. Just never looked back. Fell in love with the position, and probably a bit different to how some of the modern keepers do it. I was never in an academy. I never sort of had any trials apart from until Wolves came in and offered me at 17. I was lucky, like I say, I've got a good group of mates. My best mate Darren Wassall ended up going and playing. He was at Notts Forest at the time, and he had a good career at Forest and Derby, Birmingham. Lee Sharp was 2 or 3 years younger than us. Steve Gwynn, and so we all came from Hagley.
Vince, who did you support during your childhood?
I was a baggy mate. I was a West Brom fan, brought up. My family are all from the Black Country, Smethwick. My dad's office was literally about a quarter of a mile from the Hawthorns. And as a kid, I was a season ticket holder. I was brought up with Cyril Regis, Laurie Cunningham, Tony Godden. They were a really good team. So I was a West Brom fan.
How was it like playing for Wolves after being a West Brom fan?
That's people talk about rivalries, and fans probably don't. It's probably hard for them to I wouldn't say accept it, but to understand that I was at Wolves. I was being paid by Wolves. I trained with them. In my younger days, I wasn't in the first team squad, so when the first team were away, I'd go and watch. So one Saturday I'm at the Hawthorns watching Albion. The Saturday after I'm at Molineux watching the Wolves, and I've got good friends that are Wolves fans. I've got good friends that are Albion fans, and even today, I still speak to, got allegiances to both sides. So to me, you take as you find. It was a sad day, the day that Steve Bull scored a winner at the last minute at the Hawthorns for Wolves to win the game. And I jumped up and cheered, and looking back, there's probably a part of me maybe regrets that, but that's what you do. You, as a pro, professional, you're paid to to be at a club, and while you're at that club, they're the be all and end all.
Yeah. Okay. So signing for Wolves in 1985, was it?
Yeah, it's not straightforward. I was at school. I stayed on at school doing A levels. I was 1 year into my A levels. Wolves. I mean, again, you're going to talk about Bournemouth, I think, and the sad days. And Wolves were. That's exactly where Wolves were. They hadn't got any money. The Batty brothers. They were, two sides of the ground. Two sides of the ground were closed. It was unsafe. And Wolves offered me, to this day, I joke, it was one of the best contracts I had. I was still at school, doing A levels, but Wolves signed me on what they called non-contract forms. They gave me £50 a week. It was literally cash in hand. But I signed that form, and then 12 months later, I signed. I finished my A levels, and I signed full time. As a pro, I wasn't on much more money, but it's and sort of that's how I got into it.
So you made your debut for the club in the 4th division.
1986, Cambridge at home.
Cambridge at home, 2-1 defeat. If I'm facts right. What do you remember about your debut?
Well, it probably started. The story probably started. I don't know, a month, 6 weeks before that. Tim Flowers was the first team goalkeeper, and Wolves sold him to Southampton. Scott Barrett was the backup keeper. First day pre-season, he did his knee, needed a cartilage operation. So I basically went through pre-season as the only fit goalkeeper at the club. Brian Little was the manager. Like I say, Wolves were, the lowest of the low at the times. The Batty brothers, if you talk to Wolves fans, there's a symmetry with Bournemouth. Probably that the club were very close to going out of existence. And I think it was more, it was a case that I had to play. There were five of us, all teenagers, making our debut that day. Brian Little was the manager. A legend from his Villa days, a lovely guy. And I've said that, I've done interviews like this before, and I was quite blasé. I look back now and I think, was that really me? I just turned up and played football. I didn't think, oh my God, I'm playing Football League. I'm playing at Molineux. They've had 50,000 people here and stuff like that. I just went out and played football, and I did my best. I think we lost with a last-minute goal. I got lobbed the last minute. I thought I'd done all right, but literally the Monday morning then, Brian Little pulled me into the office, sort of said, look, son, you're going to be a good keeper, but it's too soon for you. I need to protect you. We're going to get someone in on loan. And he said, but I need you for the Cup. I need you for the League Cup at Lincoln next week. And that was it. And, like I say, he brought in Eric Nixon. And then, sort of other keepers came in, and I didn't play another league game for 6 years, or 5 years, I think it was. But that I was just blasé about it. Like I say, I was a young kid. I'd had no goalkeeping coaching. I was now at this professional club. We had a goalkeeping coach come in a couple of days a week, and it was groundbreaking for me. And I was just loving it. And I didn't mind if I was playing or not. I didn't think like that in those days, and all this about competing for a place. I just, I was just playing football, and someone was giving me some money to do it.
You did have some tough competition between the sticks at Molineux throughout the years there, with the likes of Mark Kendall and Mike Stoll. How was training daily with those guys, and did they teach you anything about the game?
Yeah, obviously, sort of Kendo, bless him, he's not with us any longer, taken far too soon. But he was a big influence. He was probably, like I say, Tim had been at the club for 12 months. I'd only been going in 1 day a week, so I had a few sessions with him. So he was a young keeper trying to make a name for himself as well. So, while I got on well, and, when we trained together, it wasn't, we were sort of individuals, but Kendo came in and, he really took me under his wing, and then we had, goalkeeping coach Eric Steele came in 2 days a week, and, that was a massive influence for me as well. And I learned a lot. And then there were times, like you say, Stowley came in, there's another guy, Tony Lang, that the club brought in as well at one stage. So sometimes I was like third choice goalkeeper, and I'd play out. I'd sort of go in, sort of sessions. Graham Turner, the manager at the time, used to have a set Thursday morning that, you knew what you were doing, even before we turned up. And some days he loved this 9v9, and we had a set of rules in the 9v9. But if we hadn't got enough players, I'd play as an outfield player. So some days I'd be marking Steve Bull or Andy Much. And I'm like, I'm not good enough to mark these, but I've got Kendo or Mike Stowell behind me, communicating, teaching me, telling me what to do. And in my head, I'm learning, what I need to do when I'm there from a communication point, but I'm also learning how to defend to mark Steve Bull. So when I am in goal, I can then talk to my defenders about how to what I need from my defenders and from a goalkeeping point. So that, just the whole experience, I came on sort of leaps and bounds with it, and working with those guys, like I say, Kendo. I don't know how, if you remember him or you ever saw him play. He was, you wouldn't call him the finest athlete you've ever seen. He carried like I am now, carrying a few pounds too many, but he was an unbelievable goalkeeper. He could make some unbelievable saves. He'd catch crosses, and he's probably the goalkeeper that I've seen, and before Edison came along, the assists where he'd catch a ball and he'd got this drive half volley that he'd drive, from a counter attack, and Andy Much would flick it on and Bully would score. And I lost count of the number of goals that Kendo was an assist for. So lots to learn from those guys as a young goalkeeper growing up.
You had several home moves during this time. Blackpool, Cheltenham, West Brom. Did you enjoy your time at those clubs?
Yeah. Again, later on, I think we'll probably talk about what I'm doing now and, passing on my experience, and that, things like that were good experiences. Blackpool was fantastic. I played league football. I made my debut for Wolves, and then I probably had 18 months sort of away from it, sort of 18s and reserve football. And then Blackpool offered me a chance of first team football for a couple of months, and that was a good experience. Enjoyed that. Cheltenham, was that the following season, or it was literally they'd got Jim Barron was the manager. He'd been at Wolves when I first came in, and then he was there, and he got an experienced goalkeeper in Paul Barron, but Paul had a cartilage operation, and it was literally, they needed someone for 4 or 5 weeks, and I went in, started the season. They were in the conference in those days, and I remember thinking, the first game of the season we played Gateshead, and oh my God, I'll never forget the game. I think every single member of the Gateshead team was 6'3", 6'4". It was brutal. It was Wimbledon, and with some, did well, learned about crosses and how to protect myself. And I remember that month going back to Wolves thinking, no disrespect to those guys, but I need to be better than conference football or conference in those days. It was brutal, and that was a good month for me. It was an eye opener, and it was something that really kicked me on. And then the West Brom thing, again, that was going as cover. Mel Rees, and bless his soul, another one that's gone. He was the backup keeper to Stuart Naylor, and obviously being a West Brom fan, just a chance to go and be at West Brom for 4 or 5 weeks. I think it was 6 weeks in the end. That was just as cover, but to help West Brom at the time. I think they were pushing for promotion. So I didn't really play much. I played sort of a few reserve games, but I knew probably my time at Wolves was coming to an end. I knew I needed to try and sort of just put my name about to try and get a move. And ironically, I was at West Brom, and they played Wolves at Molineux, and Mike Stowell did his cruciate in the game, and literally Wolves said, "Look, we're calling you back." There were 7 games left in the season. Called me back. Tony Lang played 2 or 3, and then they stuck me in for the last 4 games of the season. I did really well. For really good games. Played Middlesbrough away, Blackburn away, Hull at home, and Portsmouth home last game of the season. Did really well, and Wolves offered me a new contract to stay, but I turned it down because I knew I needed first team football.
And of course, at that point, you joined Bournemouth, and that was in 1991 for 35,000. What attracted you to Dean Court in particular?
I had a phone call. It was a long summer waiting for the phone to ring, and I won't lie, I didn't get too many calls. And then I was just about to go back to pre-season with Wolves. Sort of thinking, well, hopefully something's going to happen. And I think I'd been away on holiday for a week and sort of came back, and my mum, in those days, you sent your details off to the PFA, and they let all the clubs know, and you just waited for a phone call. There were no agents or anything like that. And literally got home, and Mum and Dad said, this guy Harry's called, wants you to go down to Bournemouth and have a chat. So I had to look where Bournemouth was on the map for a 22, 23-year-old lad from the Midlands. I wasn't too sure where Bournemouth was in those days. And I came down and met Harry. He did the usual trick. He put me in the raw bath for a night, and I thought that was what Bournemouth was. He took me for a meal at an Italian restaurant. I didn't realise he was invested in it at the time and all that. So we had talks. And then the next day he drove me around town, and I was like, oh yeah, this 23 years old, this could be nice. And drove me right down the sandbanks and along the seafront and showed me the training. I was like, yeah. And he just said to me, look, I want you to come and be number one. And for a lad that had 6 years at Wolves and probably 10 first team appearances, it was the chance to come and put games on my CV was it was a chance I couldn't turn down.
What was Harry like to work under?
No, he was great. And I still see him occasionally. I owe him everything. Because Bournemouth, did put me on the map in goalkeeping terms. And I owe Harry and Bournemouth, everything for that. Harry was Harry. What you see is what you get. Is he the best coach I've ever worked under? Probably not. Is he one of the best motivators you've ever worked under? Probably. You just wanted to play for him. You wanted to do your best. He had good people around him. Tony Pulis. He's not everyone's famous first choice at Bournemouth, but again, Tony did brilliant for me. He was a different type of person to Harry. But we'd got good people, and like I say, you just wanted to play. A lot of experience in the team when I first came down, and it was. I just loved it right from the first day, the first training session, the first game, walking out of the old Dean Court. That's still Dean Court to me, not that new place up the road. The old Dean Court. In front of the South Stand with the clock and everything, it's I just loved every minute, and it was challenging, and Harry was Harry, with 5-a-sides up in, literally just across the road from Kings Park, and I remember training there with Harry and 5-a-sides, and Harry being on the wing and crossing the ball and like, that's how you do it, boys, and it's he was a motivator, and just enjoyed. Well, unfortunately, it was only 12 months playing for him, but enjoyed it.
Of course, we finished 8th in your first season. Was it disappointing that you didn't reach the playoffs? And do you think that squad should have gone up?
I never really thought about it, to be honest. Again, like I say, whether it's a fault of mine, I just live game by game and day by day, and I like playing for those 3 points. And again, I'll show my age, turning teletext on and seeing how many places you'd moved up on a Saturday night, and I didn't really look at it. I think we had a slow start to the season, and then we picked up and came with a bit of a run. And I remember going to Hartlepool last game of the season, and there was a big, ugly centre forward that sort of terrorised us that day, and we ended up signing the big panda up front, Fletch. And he cost us a place in the playoffs, and it was a long journey back. But I don't think I never got the feeling that. It was we were going to get promoted. I don't remember that. It was a good team, and a lot of good lads. There's probably more disappointment maybe in the fans. So I again, whether that's a fault of mine, I didn't take that on board. I'd loved it. To me, we'd had a great season and couldn't wait for the next one, rather than being too disappointed about missing out on the playoffs.
You played in the FA Cup game at St James's Park against Newcastle. What can you remember about the game and the penalty shootout?
Again, I remember it was obviously a replay. I think that we'd had a rather boring 0-0 at Dean Court. I actually remember that we flew up. Harry got a plane for us to fly up. I think some of the vice presidents had, were on board and subsidised it or whatever. But I actually pulled my groin. I think we had West Brom on the Saturday, and I tweaked my groin. And then we flew up to Newcastle, and I don't know if you guys remember the fog, and it actually got abandoned. The first game got abandoned after 15 minutes. And I was probably, I was so happy about that because, everyone was moaning about, we'd flown up and we got to fly back, and, would we be able to do it? And I was thinking, thank God, I've got a chance to let my groin settle down, and, I might be okay for the next game, because I was struggling that game. And then, yeah, we went back up. I can't remember too much. Obviously, I've seen, see the footage, the goals, and we gave them a good game. They were obviously under a lot of pressure. I think it was one of our Dealers' last games, if I remember right. I just remember penalties, and like I say, I was lucky enough to sort of, one hit me, and looked up, and I just saw these lads running at me, and I see the footage now, and it's embarrassing, little skips, and then you get mobbed. But I remember being in the dressing room after, and it's it was the sort of thing that you think, yeah, this is what I want. This is why you want to be a footballer, for the good days. It's funny. The memories sort of fade, but that sense of that achievement and that pride in what you did, that doesn't go.
What do you think your best performance was at Bournemouth, Vince?
Crikey. Probably paying the mortgage every week. That was a challenge at some weeks. I can't remember that. There's like, I'm funny. I remember weird things. I remember playing Torquay. We played Torquay on a Tuesday night, and Torquay were bottom of the league, and it was one of the best games I ever had. And then the 95th minute, there was a cross come in, and for some reason I thought it was going wide. I let it go, and it went right in the top corner. And it's and we got a long trip back from Torquay, so we go, then on the Friday night. So Torquay were bottom, they go off the bottom. Swansea were then bottom. Friday night, we're away at Swansea at the Vetch Field, and they tore us apart that night. But again, I did well. I'm not one that through my career, I was pride that sort of probably consistent. There's good performances that I remember. But I'm not one. I don't sort of sit back and egos and stuff like that. Plus, I'm getting older. I can't remember those days. 91's a long time ago now. So, I'm struggling to probably pick one out, if I'm being honest.
I know we just briefly touched on it, but how did Tony Pulis compare to Harry? Is there anything that stands out that in memory that put them totally different between each other, or?
No, to me, they're probably chalk and cheese in their outlook on the game, their philosophy on the game. But that's probably they probably work well as a pairing, and that's probably why when Harry left, Tony took over. He hadn't got that support probably. I think he's gone on to prove that he's a good manager. At the time, he probably didn't have the people around him that he needed. Maybe there's nothing wrong. Tone's outlook was, if you keep a clean sheet, you only have to score one goal. Whereas Harry's like, well, if you concede 4, we'll score 5. And to me, that sums up their philosophies. In similar ways, I go to Arsenal, and you got George Graham, that was renowned for the famous back 4 or back 5, and Arsenal 1-0, and then Arsene Wenger comes in, and he's got a totally different philosophy as well. So. To me, it doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong. They both had a big influence, and obviously Tony especially, and ended up playing for him again at Gillingham later on.
Vince, who would you say is the best player that was at Deanport during your time?
I'm still friends with some of them, so I better get.
Fletch might watch this as well.
No, he's well down the list. Don't worry about that. Again, I've asked, I've done interviews for different clubs, and Arsenal, and people ask me who's the best player at Arsenal, and it's like my stock answer to that is, well, you can have 11 Dennis Bergkamps, you won't win anything, but he's probably the best player I've ever had the privilege to be on a football pitch with. You need a Tony Adams, you need a Ray Parlour, and Bournemouth's the same in those respects. One of my best mates, Guppy, Mark Morris. He's one of the best defenders I've played with. He'd be the first to admit he's probably not. Well, he wouldn't. He thinks he's a silky winger at times as well, but he was like hard centre half, win at all costs, and great lad to sort of play behind. You got Mozzie, sort of left back, Keithy Rowe. I think the problem when you ask that question with me, a lot of the lads I played with at Bournemouth were young and probably didn't show how good they were until they went on. Keithy's a good example. Neil Masters, was a good player. Joe Parkinson. We had some good players, and then obviously you've got the other end of the spectrum. People like Casey, Jimmy Case, what a player he was, and he showed signs of it with us, in those 12 months. And you just, I remember a couple of games thinking, wow, I'd love to have seen him in his prime and his pomp. So, I don't think I don't like saying who the best one was. We had some good players, and I think, that everyone I played with proved that they were there on merit. And yeah, I'm going to sit on the fence on that one if you don't mind.
No, that's fair enough, Vince. Not a problem at all.
So an offer of 250,000 from Arsenal was enough for the Cherries board to sell you on. What do you remember from that time?
What, about how the move came, or?
Well, just about the whole process. How the move came. Did you?
I thought I'd probably, there was a chance I was going to move the year before. There was talk of Forest, Blackburn as well. Sort of Kenny Dalglish came to watch me in a friendly at Farnborough or something. You hear these stories, and nothing materialised. And then I was out of contract. Again, Tony sort of pulled me in the office, and he sort of jokingly sort of handed me a new offer, and he said, "Look, I know you're not going to sign it." He said, "To be honest, I don't think we can afford to pay it anyway." So, they needed to sell me, and to be honest, I was going to go to Leicester. I sort of saw Tony. He was packing up. He just had the sack. He was sort of putting his goods into a little cardboard box in his office, and I said, "Oh yeah, thanks, Tone. Thanks for everything." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm off now to talk to Leicester." And I was literally driving out from Dean Court, and there's a little shop just on the way out on the left-hand side, and there was an old Billy Walker who used to be the greenkeeper over at Queen's Park Golf Club. We knew him well, and he played back in the day for Newcastle, and he's crossing the road in front of me, and I stopped, and he's like, "Well, where are you going?" I said, "I'm off to Leicester," and he said, "Oh, don't." He said, "My good friend is Steve Burnshaw, the chief scout at Arsenal." He said, "They've been looking at you." He said, Don't sign for Leicester until you've heard from me." And literally, as I'm driving up the motorway, I get a call from Arsenal. So I went to talk to Leicester, who was Brian Little, who'd given them a debut at Wolves, so there was a connection there. And then literally we went to Leicester. Straight from Leicester, went down to Arsenal, and had the decision to make. Do I go to Leicester, where I've got a chance of competing for a first team spot? I think they got Gavin Ward, Russell Holt, Kevin Poole, and myself. And Brian Litt was saying, "Look, you're as good as anyone. I'm not guaranteeing anything." Or there was Arsenal, where George Graham was saying, "We've got the best keeper in England and in Europe, in the world maybe, but we want you to come and be number two to him." And it wasn't an easy choice, I have to say.
What was it like being understudy to David Seaman and also training with him every day?
Yeah, you sort of go in, and again, I wasn't like I wouldn't call myself in those days a student of the game. I wasn't, I'd watch a football, but I wasn't like a nerd. I didn't know everyone. I didn't know too much. I'll be honest, I didn't know too much about Arsenal and the back four and the players, and then you go in there and it's like, wow, and goal, call him goalie. Seaman, he was the best. He was that good. He made things look easy and simple. And I just got so much respect for him. He is the best keeper I've ever seen live. And working with him every day, and Bob Wilson, to have him as your goalie coach, treating you with the same respect and sort of advising you. And Bob's great thing was he didn't try and make me into Dave Seaman. He looked at my techniques, and there was a couple of little things. And he said, "I'm not going. That works for you. I'm not going to try and change that." And that's what made Bob so great. And I say I had I had 2 years where I was number 2, and then sort of I turned down a new contract. Went on to a week-to-week contract, got injured first game of pre-season while I was trying to get a move, and I was out for 3 months. And by the time I was fit again, Alex Manninger was at the club, John Lukic had come back. So that all of a sudden you're down the pecking order. And those last sort of 12, 18 months were a little difficult. They were probably the hardest time in my career, but you're still at a club like Arsenal, and training with great players all the time.
You did play a number of games for Arsenal. What was it like having the famous Gunners backline of Dixon, Adams, Bold and Winterburn in front of you? They were a fantastic back four, but would you say that they're the best back four that you've ever played with?
Yeah, no. Again, I've got sort of Mosley, Mark Morris, Keithy. If you're watching this, I do apologise, but yeah, they were in the, they were that season, that couple of seasons. They were probably difficult seasons for Arsenal. There's, I went there and sort of within 6 months, George Graham had gone, been sacked because of the Bung scandal. There were things about the players, Tony Adams, Mercer. I don't have to go over them, but there was a lot of disrupt at the club, shall we say, and it affected on the pitch a little bit. But you could still see the quality of the players, and they proved it. Later years again, going on and winning doubles and stuff like that, and the likes of Baldy and Tony playing late into their 30s. They showed that they'd got that quality. To me, it was a privilege. I signed for the club just to the chance to pull that shirt on once, to play at Highbury, to walk into those marble hallways and play a game, and Highbury was it was the best place I've ever played football. That and Wembley are the two places that it was a privilege to play there.
So while you were away from Bournemouth, settled in at Arsenal, were you aware of all the financial goings on back at Dean Court?
I think I was aware of them before I'd left. Like I say, I talked about that Swansea game. I remember Harry coming in the dressing room after, and literally his team talk was, "Lads, this club's 20 million in debt. I've not been paid for 4 months, and you lot play like that." And walked out, got in his car, and we didn't see him till the Monday morning. And then obviously he left, and we knew there were problems. There were months we didn't get paid. There was one day in particular I remember. I don't think we'd been paid for 6-7 weeks. My friend Derek McGregor, who I still speak to, I don't know if you remember him from the Bournemouth Echo.
Yeah.
Derek was ringing around everyone. "Oh, yeah, you're not being paid. Oh, you've not been paid." And we went into training, and Tony said, "Lads, look," he said, "I know the press are on." He said, "You'll be paid today." And literally, we finished training. We went back to the ground, and we all had to go into the chairman's office. And Norman Hayward, bless him, lovely guy. And I'll never forget, he bent down behind the desk and he picked up this Sainsbury's carrier bag and literally looked at it, and it just gave you a wad of notes, and we got paid cash. And he said, "Oh, thank you for not saying anything." So you knew the club was in debt. You knew the club was in trouble. And I think it was a long, painful process, and it took a long time. Even then, when I came back in later years, in coaching roles, it was still going on.
Is there any appearances for Arsenal that do stand out, Vince, or would you say it's similar to the situation at Bournemouth where you don't really dwell on them?
No, yeah, I'm probably going to sound a bit hypocritical. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Walking out at Old Trafford in a Arsenal Man United game, or Newcastle. No, I'm being facetious. No, you do realise the difference in sort of in those days, Division 2 football and the Premier League, whatever it is. And when you're at a club like Arsenal, it's the daft things, going into London to get measured up for an aquascutum suit, and you have to carry your little suit holder around everywhere, and you're getting on the coach all suited and booted, and then you come back on the coach after a game, and just sort of dining room set up, and you've got people, waiters serving you meals, and when I went there, George Graham said to me, he said, "We do everything for you. All you have to do is worry about going and playing football." And I know what he was trying to say, but in those days, they were still a million miles away from that. Nowadays, literally, I think the players do that. All they have to do is go and play football. There's advisors, there's people, welfare at the club. They need a mortgage. Someone will get a mortgage advisor in to speak to them. They literally do just go and concentrate on playing football. And, Arsenal were ahead of the game in those respects, in a lot of things. And, that's where you realise the difference. But like I say, I was just, looking back now, it's a privilege to play any game at Highbury for Arsenal, walking, like I say, into the Marble Hall, into those dressing rooms, walking down that corridor onto that pitch was a privilege. And then to be, like I say, involved in games, walking out at Old Trafford, Newcastle, Newcastle away, I had one of my best games ever. I've never got the video of it. I've seen the goal again. I say, it was the best game I've ever had for 94 minutes. And then Peter Beardsley stuck one in the top corner. And literally, we kicked off, right his pass to Johnny Hartson, and we've not even had time to get out the centre circle, and the rest blown for full time. That's one video I would like to see one day. But yeah, they're the highlight. Any day you pulled that shirt on was a highlight.
So, late 1997, you spent 12 games out on loan at Huddersfield. How did that come about?
Eric Steele. So Eric Steele had been my coach at Wolves. He was, again, we talk about difference in times. I think every club in the country's got a full-time goalie coach now. Steely was at a championship club, Huddersfield, 2 days a week, and he was doing Barnsley 2 days a week. He was doing Derby 3 days a week. So that's how goalie coaches made a career. But Huddersfield, again, they were bottom of the league. I think 12 games into the season, they'd got 4 points. Brian Horton had just been sacked. The manager was Jackson. Oh God, what's his name? Peter Jackson. And Terry Yorith was the assistant. And they wanted a goalkeeper, and Steely recommended me. And I went up there. I had 2 months. Absolutely loved the place. I was looking at houses. And I said earlier that, the 18 months trying to get away from Arsenal was my lowest. The day, the deal fell through, it was literally 3 days before Christmas, and it all fell apart. And I walked out, and I rang Arsenal, and they were brilliant. They said, "Look, go home." I went back to the Midlands to mum and dad, and had Christmas. And just had a few days, and that was probably the lowest time. I was gutted that because I thought that's it. That it was a champ club. We'd sort of done well. We were sort of mid-table by Christmas, and yeah, it all fell apart. And yeah, I was gutted.
You spent a short time.
Thanks for bringing that one up. No, I did, again, from the footballing point, it was games. I'd put my name about a bit again, and sort of a couple of games on the telly. We beat Man City on Sky 1-0, keeping a clean sheet, a couple of saves, and just little things like that. And I'm a big believer things happen for a reason, and you need a kick in the teeth, to bounce back from it. And whether I needed it, whether it was what I needed at the time. But ultimately, I think it turned out all right again.
You did spend a short time, Vince, under legendary Arsenal manager Arsene Wenger. He was said to be revolutionary at the time. What did you think of him?
Yeah, it was. How do I put this? different especially when he first came in. And I remember sort of Arsenal, the old Colney training ground. Sorry, the lads used to line up outside and outside like the physio room, and we'd wait for the manager. And the George Graham days, he'd come out and do a little talk about what we're doing in training. And I remember this day. So Arsenal had been announced in September, but because of the Japanese season, it didn't actually come in until the October. And we're all lined up and waiting. And this guy walks past, and he was in like a 1980s Arsenal shell suit. The glasses. He looked like one of the lads said something like, I won't repeat, but it wasn't very copper. He walked past and he just turned and went, "Good morning," and everyone looked. And footballers being footballers with a few smirks. And but that was first appearances. How wrong can you be? He was groundbreaking. He changed everything. Not everyone liked all the changes. My missus still hates him for making the players' lounge a dry lounge after a game. She couldn't get a drink, but that was one thing. But no, diet. He was massive. The biggest thing was things like the diets, pre-match meals. The lads had to eat certain things. They had to eat things in a certain order, and it was. I remember so you'd have like little crudity starters, so little, I don't know, celery sticks with dips and that, and then you had to have your pasta. And then you could have your meat and veg dishes, and you had to have it in this certain order. And I remember the reserves trying to do, after about 3 or 4 months where the first team were flying, they said, right, we're going to do it with the reserves now. And we took a strong reserve team to Oxford. And, it's pre-match. Yeah, we're going to have this pre-match. And we had all this stuff, and we got done 7-0. And I remember the lads all after, they're like, I can't eat that much and then play football. And it was like, it took time to get used to it, and it was so different, but the proof was in the pudding. We were taking capsules again. Nowadays it's probably sort of everyone does it, but we were taking creatine tablets and caffeine tablets and vitamins, and it was the daft things. I remember Lee Dixon, they flew him to the south of France to see a doctor. He got an injury, and when he came back, he walked in the dressing room and how was it? He said, just saw this doctor, and he said, I don't know anything about you. He said, just sit and I examine. He said, he opened his mouth, and he said he stuck his finger in his mouth, and he went, yeah, you've done your meniscus in your right knee. And Lee was like, yeah, how did you know that? Just so some of the things witch doctors or what, it was different. It was groundbreaking. It was different, and they were ahead of the game, and that's what did it for them for years and years. And then, unfortunately, I think other people cottoned on and did similar in different ways, and the Arsenal sort of fell behind others, and they're not really, or they're just starting to catch up by the look of it. But he was also a very good coach. I've got to say that. Some Sundays you'd go in, being in the reserves or the stiffs or the mushrooms, whatever you call it. Some Sundays you go in and there'd be like 4 or 5 of you that weren't involved on the Saturday, and normally they're horrendous sessions. But I remember coming away on a Sunday, like you'd have a session with Arson and I don't know, someone like Kevin Campbell maybe, who hadn't been sort of playing, and Paul Dickoff, my mate, and you'd have a small group session and you come away buzzing because it was such a good session, and it was like, well, that shouldn't happen on a Sunday like that, but because he was such a good coach, he had that to back it up, as well as all the quirkiness and the different things.
So Tony Pulis came back not in for you in 1998 for a loan deal. And then he eventually signed you permanently, I think, that summer.
Well, it was the quickest loan deal ever, because apparently 2 days after I signed on loan, they made it permanent, because then that enabled them to sign another loan. But they never told me about it. I only found out about 18 months later.
So, what was the main attraction to Gillingham? Was it working with Tony again, or was it just craving the first team football, or
Well, it wasn't the area. I can guarantee that. He didn't take me around the Medway towns. No, it was first team football. I knew Tony. I knew him well. When he sold me, they were pushing for promotion. They'd done well they'd gone out of League, or what was League Two in those days. The old fourth division. They'd done well, and they wanted to kick on, and he wanted me to be a part of that, and I fell for it. I just wanted to play first team football again. Obviously, there were a couple of lads, Bournemouth connections down there. Neil Masters was there. Adi Pennock was there. Mark O'Connor was the coach, down there, and obviously Tony. So it was an easy decision.
Your first full season, though, you reached the playoff final against a very strong Manchester City team in one of the most memorable playoff finals of all time. What can you remember from that day?
Oh, well, I remember everything because Sky keeps showing it every 6 weeks. Every time I turn Sky on, it's on there. So you can't exactly forget it. Great season. Got into the playoffs, beat Preston over 2 legs. I have to say the second leg against Preston at Priestfield, the old Priestfield was, you talk about the old Dean Court, Priestfield was falling down. You go there now, it's a million times better than it was, when I first went there. But that night we played Preston, the chairman did a great job. He got the local radio in, the speakers, the fireworks. That was the best atmosphere I've ever played in, and we got through, and going to Wembley for the first time. The excitement of all that, the build up, and then to being involved in a game like that. There's a bottle of champagne somewhere that I got man of the match, and it's. But I'm pragmatic. That like I said earlier, things happen for a reason, and I've said to Gills fans, and I did something like this for Gillingham, and I said I still believe it was the best thing for the club, because we went back 12 months later and we wrung the right, and we were better prepared then to stay in the Championship for 3 or 4 years like we did. If we'd have gone up that year, beat Man City, did we have the strength in depth in the squad, the infrastructure? Tony left as well, so I don't know. Maybe that's just me wishful thinking, but it was an unbelievable game. Like I say, we watched it literally 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the missus, why do you watch this? It's obviously my best mate as well on the other team, Dickie. It's just you almost couldn't write it.
What do you remember about games for Gillingham against Bournemouth? Some not always good things. No, it was built up, I think, with the Tony Pulis, AD as well. AD, he was badly treated with Bournemouth, with Mel Machin. They told him he'd never play again, and they sent him packing, and then he carried on playing for another 6-7 years. So AD had a bit to prove, and there's a few things. I think the first game was the 3-3 at Dean Court. Came back. That was my first time back. I can't remember anything about the game, but I got a good mate, a guy called Gary Fenley. He was actually a bouncer in the clubs in the days. He then went on. He made a career in skips around Bournemouth and stuff. He's still about. He's a good lad. He's a big lad. He was bouncer. I think in the day he was like 24, 25 stone. And so I've come out for the game, and I knew. Everyone knew I was coming back, and I was going to see people. So we obviously, the away team, we obviously went down the Brighton Beach end, and I can't remember why we changed ends before the game, so the toss up. So I've gone running down to the other end. So the Brighton Beach, the South Stand, I got a nice welcome from them. But that's fine, okay. So anyway, the game started. About a minute into the game, the ball goes down to the right-hand side of my goal. I go to get the ball, and in those days, they put the disabled people in front of the stand, in front of the stand. So I go to get the ball, sat in a wheelchair, literally 6 feet from my goal, is my mate, Big Gary. All right, Vince. So I just started laughing. So I'm having a bit of banter with him.
the best was the fans in the stand think I'm winding up. I'm giving grief to some Bournemouth fan in the wheelchair. So they're giving me grief for having banter with my mate. I don't know what realised. So don't ask me about the game. It was 3-3. That's all I know about that. And then another. So obviously that was the year we got to Man City, and I came down during that summer after the Man City game. My missus is from Bournemouth, and we came to see family. And I remember sort of being in the house, and the Daily Echo was there. And Neil, I think it's Neil Perrott. I had a message on Facebook with him the other night about a concert I went to. But so Neil had done a little piece, and it was the middle of summer, and he put something about the boredom of the summer. Mate, I always feel better by thinking back to Gillingham at Wembley and the faces of Messrs Bartram, Pennock and Pulis, and I get enjoyment from their grief. So that was basically, and I was like, I don't like that. I'm not happy about that. So I kept it, and then the fixtures came out, and I think we played Bournemouth. It was either September or October. It was quite early in the season. And literally the week before the game, I went in to see Peter Taylor, was the manager then. I went in to see the gaffer. I said, Gaffer, I said, I was back in Bournemouth or something. And, so he read it, turned up for the game. We walked into the dressing room. He plastered it everywhere. He put it on the walls. He went, that's your team talk. And all the lads were like, just read it, honest. And we went out. I don't know if you remember the game. It was live on Sky. But I think Steve Robinson scored in the first minute. But after that, we won 4-1, and it was men against boys. And so Neil, if you hear this, that's you earned a sale win bonus that day. It was, but yeah, it's stuff things like that. I remember. There's another one. It was the cup game, obviously, with the bizarre winning goal where Paul Shaw was about 20 yards in offside, but
20 yards offside.
I think, Jamie Day played it back, so he was onside. And then that game as well, Jamie Day, who I know well, Daisy's good mate. He was at Arsenal as a kid. He sliced Andy Hessenthaler's thigh. Literally, Hesse was in hospital in Bournemouth for about 2 weeks. The old Adidas blade boots, sliced Hesse's thigh. Honestly, it was, they couldn't sew it up. There was all the old Dean Court, all the mud and everything. They had to flush it out for about 2 weeks before they could sew him up. So daft things like that. We had good battles. I think Gillingham were probably. We were older and a bit more experienced. Bournemouth were Bournemouth. A lot of young lads, good footballers, wanting to play football. But I think we had a good record, from our point. And there was always a little bit on it, obviously, because of what the historical things. But for me, I always enjoyed coming back and playing. Probably people didn't like me coming back, but that's another.
Of course, you had the heartbreak of the Man City game, but of course, as you mentioned, you went back a year later and was on the winning side at Wembley. What was it like that day?
Well, what I can remember, the day. It was a different day, obviously. Wigan, with all respect, I think there was 58,000. I think Wigan took 8,000. The year before it was 88,000, and it was probably 44,000 from City and Gillingham. It was a half empty Wembley, but the Gills fans were, it was amazing, and to go to extra time, and we were 2-1 down, penalty. And you're thinking, you're just thinking it's never going to happen. And then we got 2 late goals. Obviously, Andy Thompson's header, literally 2 minutes from the end. And oh my God, it was just a relief. The emotions and a bloody good evening.
After 200 games for Gillingham, your career has ended bizarrely by another goalkeeper, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah. I played Millwall at Priestfield. Ding-dong game with 4-3 up. I made a save in the last minute. It's gone out for a corner, and Dennis Wise has put a ball into the box, and I've got a punch. And I don't know how. To this day, I don't know if it's on the punch or I know I was high in the air and for some reason I ended up going head first, sort of like speared into the ground, and I put my hand out and I'm lying on the floor, and I could see my wrist was like a Z. I knew straight away it was a bad one. And bizarrely, the physio came on. And we called him Ming. He looked like Emperor Ming. He had the old sort of beard on. And Ming was like, "Come on, let's." I said, "I've done my wrist, Ming." He said, "Yeah, the game's finished." He said, "It's all over." I was like, "Oh, right, okay." So he's put my arm in a sling and went down the new tunnel at Priestfield, and you go straight into the physio room. And I was there, and within 20 minutes, I'm in an ambulance, and I'm thinking, none of the lads came to see me. I nearly swore, but sods, not one of them came to see me. So gutted for you. Anyway, night in hospital. Cut long story. They sent me home. I was then booked in to see a private specialist on the Tuesday. I still hadn't heard anything. So Tuesday lunchtime, I'm at home. I think AD Pennick was probably the first person. Vince, he said, we were in training today. We had yesterday off. He said, no one knew you were injured. He said, literally, the final whistle went. We've all gone in the dressing room, and no one even realised you weren't there. He said, we've just heard you broke your wrist and all. Anyway, from then on, the phone didn't stop. I'm getting lad after lad. Next thing, I get a phone call. This Scouse accent. I'm not good with Scouse accents, but I do anyway. I go, hello. I said, who's that? He went, Vince, it's Tony Warner, the Millwall goalkeeper. I said, hi, Tony, how are you? So, Vince, yeah. He said, I'm so sorry, mate. I said, it's not your fault. He said, yeah, you came out of nowhere. I was like, you what? He said, yeah, it was me that whacked you. He said, I've come up. He said, why has this put the corner in? He said, I thought I was going to score. And all of a sudden, you've come from nowhere and we've just collided. So, yeah, I ended up, broke my wrist in 5 places, had it pinned, had a little Meccano set with five pins and 3 little bars holding it all in place for 6 weeks. But eventually, I got restricted movement, and I think that was the September, literally January the 1st, I took retirement. But yeah, so I'm on a website somewhere, bizarre injuries caused by another goalkeeper.
At that point, you did decide to go into goalkeeping coaching. How did you come about returning to Bournemouth as a coach during our -17 points Great Escape?
Wow, we probably need an hour just for this. I didn't go straight into it. Like I say, I took retirement. Hesse asked me, are you staying in football? And I said, no, I've had enough. I've had enough of managers and chairmen and sort of press and stuff like that. I needed to get away from football. So I did that. We were living up in Essex at the time. We had a few issues with the house. There was subsidence, so we needed insurance and works and blah blah blah. So we were in Essex for 2 years after I retired. I started working in a betting shop. I worked for William Hill as a deputy manager, running betting shops for them. Then moved back to Bournemouth, looking for work. I got a job at Seawoods then. It's now Eden Vauxhall down at Branksome. I was selling Vauxhalls for 18 months and realised I wasn't very good at that. So I decided to try and get back into football, and I'd set up my own little sort of soccer school, goalkeeping school. Again, Darren Wassell, my mate, he's academy manager at Derby now. He's got a sideline, a coaching company called Soccer Stars UK, and I was going to set up a branch of that. And then I met Matty Holmes, and Matty invited me to come and manage the under-9s. Matty was the academy manager at Bournemouth. Invited me to come and help with they were the under-8s at the time, but then I took over when they became 9s. And then John Saunders, a very good friend of mine, he was the managing director at Seawoods Vauxhall. He bumped into Bondi one day on a flight, and Bondi was looking for someone to coach he didn't want someone to coach the first team goalkeepers. He wanted someone to help the younger keepers. So Ryan Price and the young keepers that were there at the time. In the end, Bondi sort of called me up and he offered me a job. £50 a session. So literally, I'd go in on a Tuesday and a Friday, a Thursday, and do a couple of hours and £100. And then there was like I say, I was doing a couple of nights with the Centre of Excellence. And again, we go back to the money side. It was I was there for about 18 months doing that sort of dual role. And at the end of the month, I'd put in a paycheck, I'd put in a receipt. And some days, Neil Vash, who's still there, he'd just look at me and go, nah, you're not going to get that. And I think out of 18 months and 18 paychecks, I think I got probably 9 or 10 at most. It was it was strange. It was different, and it was a million miles from where the club is now.
What was it like to work with young Eddie Howe?
Well, Eddie was one of the. So there was Bondi when I came in. There was Bondi, and then Rob Newman, and then Eddie was the coach, and I was doing the goalkeeping coaches, like I say, 2 days a week. I think Eddie was learning the game, learning his trade, taking it all in. I remember even those days he'd notes and he was noting stuff down. He was fine. He was good with me. Obviously, then, like you say, we had the year with the 17 points. Didn't have a great start. So then Kevin went, and then Jimmy obviously came in. I thought that was going to be good. Obviously, I played with Jimmy. Obviously, Jason Tyndall came in with Eddie as assistant. With Jimmy. Eddie then went back to be academy manager while Jimmy was there, which was strange. And then obviously the rest history, as they say.
And then you was goalkeeping manager at Southampton's academy, but you've recently moved over to goalkeeping scout and pathways monitor. How do those two roles differ?
Basically, one's on grass and one's off grass. That's the simplest way of explaining that. Yeah, so I left Bournemouth and I ended up going to Portsmouth for 9 months. So I only need Brighton, and I've done every club on the south coast. But and then I got a full-time role at Southampton, August 2010. Again, lots of stories. I could tell you lots more, but basically went in there as academy goalkeeping coach, and then they upgraded it to academy goalkeeping manager, which just meant I oversaw some of the goalkeeping coaches within the club. And then about 18 months ago, or just after COVID hit, a change of role. I was offered the chance to sort of get into the scouting side. So rather than coaching and on grass and kicking balls all day, I let other people do that. And I sort of I'm now sort of goalkeeping scout for the club. But also, if there's outfield players, obviously there's only 2 keepers, and a lot of the games in midfield. So they'll always ask me about outfield players. But I look at everything from under-7 pre-academy right up to first team. And I've been to Bournemouth probably more the last 12, 18 months in this new role than I had for the 20 years since I left almost.
It's fair to say Southampton have got one of the best academies in the entire country. Would you agree with that, Vince? And the outstanding players that they've had come through. Yeah,
and Bournemouth fans probably won't like me saying it. I'll probably be honest. I've probably lost a bit of affinity with Bournemouth over the years, and with the money side and things like that. There's still at times I was sort of treated badly, and I know people in the area, sort of workmen that were did jobs and never got paid, and you look at the money they're spending now. There's a bit that you think, well, is that right? Is that fair? But the biggest thing for me is the training ground. They need to get that sorted. The academy, they don't sort of or they haven't invested in that in the way they probably could have done, and for the kids in the area. Again, like I say, when I was managing the under-9s, the kids were all local kids, and there were some good players. Sam Shering, who has just been sold to Northampton. He was in my under nines, and there's others. Antonio Diaz, who's around the non-league scene. Connell Morrison and Wimborne and places like that. They were lads in the academy, and there's one thing that now Bournemouth have got back in the Premier League. That they not learn from Southampton, but there's one thing that Bournemouth I'd love for them to do. It's get some of the infrastructure and give something back for the kids in the area. You need to spend money, and that's one thing Southampton do. When I went there, they were a League One club, and Les Reed and Matt Crocker, they said we've ring fenced the money for the academy. No matter what happens with the first team, there is this money. We will invest it, and from that you've had I've had the pleasure of working with Luke Shaw, Callum Chambers, Prowse, people like that, Harrison Reed at Fulham. Lots of good lads that are making good careers, and I just hope Bournemouth. There's lads in around the area. I won't just say the Bournemouth area, but Dorset, and even going into Hampshire that will benefit from Bournemouth getting back in the Premier League again.
And the final bit, your influence still shines to this day as a goalkeeper. I'm good friends with a gentleman called Brian Baxter, and we did mention this before we actually come on. His son Jamal plays for Christchurch, but you've got two sons who are aspiring and very good goalkeepers as well, haven't you?
Yeah, they're doing well. Mars is 19, and he got into Christchurch first team last season. Men's football did well. A couple of relatively high profile games. For Christchurch against some decent teams, Hamworthy and Brock and Bashley. They're good non-league teams, and Mars is into there. And then Heath, my youngest, he could be a good little keeper. He's going to go to Eastleigh next year in their scholarship program. I've tried getting him into Bournemouth, but they won't have him because of me, I don't think. But he's a good coming on, developing. He's similar to me, that he's a bit late and mature, and I think he's going to sign for Brock as well and play in their 18s and dev squad. So. Anyone in the area locally looking at grassroots keepers, you might see my two boys, and like I say, that's how I came in or got into the pro game, and there's still a chance for them.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you tonight, Vince, and thank you so much for sharing your story. And it's been really, really interesting, and all the very, very best at Southampton. I know Southampton's not our most favourite side, but at the same time, all the very best with the academy, and all the very best to your sons as well.
Cheers, thank you. And like I say, I was a West Brom fan, but I was brought up with West Brom playing Wolves and Villa and Birmingham and Coventry, those local derbies. And the South Coast needs that. There's what's wrong with Brighton, Portsmouth, Southampton, and Bournemouth all being in the Premier League and having local derbies. And it's I think it's better for the area, definitely. So yeah, cheers and all the best.
Thank you so much, Vince. And thank you for everybody for joining us on this special show. Please do remember to hit the like, the subscribe and the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Please do check out our recent interview with Sean Teal, where he does discuss his time at the club, plus also Aston Villa and much, much more. We've also had Paul Mitchell on the show as well, and that's a really, really interesting interview that we had with him last week. We've also had Steve Fletcher, Steve Cook, Harry Redknapp, Luther Blizzett, plus much, much more. So please do remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Do remember to check out our podcast, Cherry Picking, where we talk about everything going on at Dean Court. And do remember, the opposition preview shows will be back very, very soon as well. So until the next video, up the cherries, and we'll see you then.